Well, politicians in Canberra didn't miss the Qantas announcement today, with both the Treasurer and the Transport Minister urging Qantas to look after its employees. But it was other issues dominating Parliament's first session after the winter break, notably carbon tax, gay marriage and the economy. Outside the Parliament, the loud message from protesters was ditch the carbon tax, while inside, Christians were fighting the push to redefine marriage and the Treasurer was talking up Australia's financial security. The Shadow Treasurer, Joe Hockey, joins us shortly, but first, political editor Chris Uhlmann with his take on the day in Canberra.
The second carbon crusade saw the faithful rise again in their thousands.
Singing lie, 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 bull crap.
There were a handful of nonconformists.
Hands up who loves Alan Jones. Everyone will raise their hand. Get with it, get educated.
And a brief schism among the like-minded.
Ditch the witch! Get that down! Get that down!
Maintain your reign!
Julia, Wayne, all the rest of them, it's just half time and we're still going.
This is the death of democracy, if you're wondering why we're doing all this.
But mostly the crowd, judged by police at over 3,000, had a common purpose, neatly summed by the opposition leader.
First, we don't want a carbon tax. And second, we do want an election. Would you trust this government with a new tax?
In Parliament's Great Hall, about 800 believers confronted another moral dilemma.
A child needs the equal love of a mother and a father, and that is what marriage calls us to honour as a society.
Imagine marriage, the oldest institution of any kind, created and defined by God Himself, is under attack. There is no greater evil.
The possibility of gay marriage divides the major parties and unites foes.
This is a destruction of marriage, not simply a redefinition.
They want me to defend the institution of marriage.
The Treasurer.
When Parliament proper began, it was the fragile world economy that was troubling the Treasurer.
The unfortunate reality is that this global instability is going to be with us for some time.
But he has faith in the nation's ability to prosper.
Australia is better placed than just about any other nation to ride out the current wave of global economic turbulence.
We're joined by the Shadow Treasurer, Joe Hockey. Welcome.
Great to be here, Chris.
Do you think that Australia is well placed if there is another global downturn?
Well, we could be better placed, and that's the point that we made today in Parliament, that this government inherited $45 billion in the bank. Now we have net debt of $110 billion. They inherited a $20 billion surplus. Now we have deficits of $20 billion. So we could be better placed.
So your prescription, if there was a recession, would be to cut government spending as hard as you possibly could?
Well, hang on. I'm not suggesting that Australia's going into recession. We still have the best terms of trade in 140 years. We have an unemployment rate of 5.1%. But Australia is not as well inoculated as it was in 2008, and that's because of the reckless spending of this government.
And the remedy is a larger surplus, that's what you think?
Well, to get the budget back to surplus, that's a starting point. Now, today was a very important day because Julia Gillard, on this, the first anniversary of her broken promise on the carbon tax, today Julia Gillard confirmed that she's breaking another promise, and that is to get the budget to surplus next year. Now, she said no ifs, no buts before the election. We will deliver that. Today, she started to walk away from that.
Can we have no ifs, no buts on just how much you would cut?
Well, we've illustrated already. We're prepared to make hard decisions. But I tell you what, as we're going through the budget, line by line, item by item, we're discovering more and more waste.
Can you give us a figure, though? If some people are saying $70 billion, I'm hearing from your office it's less than that. So would it be $70 billion worth of cuts? Would it be $50 billion? Can you give us a figure, a starting point?
Well, it depends on how much waste we find. This seems to be a bottomless well at the moment.
But you said the other day that you could find $70 billion worth of cuts if you had to, could you?
I didn't say 70
You said
billion.
50, 60, 70 billion.
Whatever the case is, wherever there is waste, we will chase it down. I mean, we're hearing about it every day, Chris, whether it be Indigenous tobacco programs, whether it be the fact that the government handed out $900 cheques to people overseas, or wasted money on pink bat programs, or gross waste in school halls programs, or computers in schools. It goes on and on and on.
Do you honestly believe that you could find between $50 and $70 billion worth of waste in the Commonwealth?
Well, hang on. The starting point is we're not going to collect a carbon tax. So that is $26 billion of less tax Australians have to pay. Currently, the government is scheduling $31 billion of expenditure against that. So immediately when we abolish the carbon tax, there'll be a saving of at least $4 billion in the budget bottom line.
All right, but you're going to find a lot more than
and I'll tell you why. Because for a starting point, we are not going to be spending $400 million administering a carbon tax with 22 new different programs attached to it.
Can you tell us how you go about finding even $30 billion over 4 years? That's the size of the Department of Defence. That's 100,000 workers.
No, it's not right. That's not quite right, because over 4 years, the Department of Defence is far larger than that.
It is.
In fact,
over 4 years,
hang on,
you're trying to find the equivalent of removing the Department of Defence from the Commonwealth budget.
No, it's not
That's
right.
100,000 workers
That's
over
not
4
right.
years.
Because over 4 years, the total budget expenditure is $1,500 billion.
For the entire government.
That's right. And if you take on revenue, which is roughly the same, perhaps a bit less under Labor, because they're running deficits, then you actually find that out of a combined flow of money of around $3,000 billion, you can't find waste.
And what I'm saying is, can you find something the size of the Department of Defence over 4 years, which is the equivalent of 100,000 workers?
Well, I don't accept those figures. They're wrong.
Those are the figures for the Department of Defence.
Well, the Department of Defence spends over 4 years considerably more than that.
I'm saying over 1 year, if you've spread it over 4 years. So could you find 100,000 workers over 4 years?
We will find money.
All right.
Because the thing is, this government wastes money, Chris. You know, for example, just the fact that they are in debt to $110 billion means that over the next 4 years, the debt interest alone will increase to $7.5 billion a year.
If you scrap the carbon tax, will you scrap the pension increases that go with it?
I'm not going to speculate on how things will be framed, because we'll wait and see when the election comes. You'll see our policy in detail.
Your boss called for an election today, so surely you're ready today, so will you scrap the pension increases?
Well, if there's no tax, there's no need for compensation, because
so
you only need compensation when you cause injury. And we will not cause injury to the Australian people.
And when you cut the carbon tax, will electricity prices fall?
Well, we would expect so.
Will they fall by the amount that people?
This is part of the. This is exactly what we're saying.
Yeah.
Electricity prices are rising. The GST is on top of those price rises. When we abolish the carbon tax, electricity prices will fall.
But we're seeing price rises now.
Well, and
got nothing to do with the carbon
tax.
tax.
Well, that's right. But electricity prices are going to go up by 10% at least as a result of the carbon tax. We'll reduce them, obviously.
So you will cut the pension?
Well, I'm not saying we'll necessarily cut the pension. You'll see what we have in plan. But I tell you what, whatever's being offered by the government now isn't real, because the government is collecting $27 billion of carbon tax, therefore increasing the price of goods for everyday Australians, and they're handing back $16 billion and telling people they're better off. Well, they're not, because prices are going up $25 billion.
When you scrap the mining tax, will you scrap the increases to super that go with it?
Well, again, you will see our full package before the election.
And again, we don't know when the election will be, and your boss calls for one every single day,
well,
so
he's
surely
right to.
You must be ready now. Will you scrap the super
increases? And if the election's called tomorrow, we'll have our policies out.
Will you scrap the super increases?
If the election's called tomorrow, we'll have our policy out.
Why can you demand that the government tells us things and you have nothing to say about the size of your cuts, about what sorts of things that you would change?
Because the government is the one running the budget today.
And you're wanting to run it?
We are, absolutely.
All right, so why can't you tell us whether or not you scrap the super increases?
Because we will indicate to you before the election exactly to the dollar where all of our money is coming from and where it's going.
Would you also, in your direct action plan, is that the best way for the government to cut carbon emissions?
Well, from our perspective, direct action is the best solution at the moment until the world comes to an agreement.
Is it the best and most efficient way to make savings?
For Australia, yes.
It is absolutely.
For Australia,
so
yes.
The market isn't a more efficient mechanism?
Well, the market isn't in play. There's no global market, Chris.
There'd be a market inside Australia?
Well, there is no global market. Carbon dioxide is a global commodity. And therefore, if it is a global commodity and there is going to be global trading, we will be part of that, I assume. But there is no global trading of this global commodity.
Joe Hockey, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris.